so often we're going to an audition to try to do well as an actor or make an impression or do it right or do it in the way that they want. When if you really focus on, I'm going to figure out if this suspect is guilty. I'm telling you, it is such a little key to happier and more fulfilling auditions. You're just doing the character's job. That character doesn't give a shit if you're a good actor or not. That character doesn't care if you get cast or if the casting director likes you. That character needs to find out if the suspect is guilty.
You're listening to Inside Acting, a podcast dedicated to demystifying the inner and the outer game of success in the entertainment industry. I'm Trevor Elgott.
And I'm AJ Meyer, and in episode 296, Trev sits down for an updated conversation with community favorite Michael Kostroff, a prolific stage and screen actor and creator of the game-changing Audition Psych 101 that you've heard us talk about on the show before. Today, Michael shares a few tips on how to be funny. Yes, how to be funny, especially if you're inherently unfunny, and how and why judgment is the death of your artistic authenticity and exploration. The simple mindset he's employed to build his extensive resume of TV roles, how he's weathered a recent 6-month casting dry spell, and a whole lot more. Episode 296, stick with us.
Support for this episode of Inside Acting is brought to you in part by Rehearsal Pro, the current and most awesomest version of Rehearsal yet. It's an essential app for every actor, and it's now available in the iTunes App Store for your iOS device. If you want to learn your lines really quickly, really reliably, and have fun doing it, if you want to be off book confidently every single time for your auditions, if you want to explore your character, make stronger choices about the scene, walk into that office with confidence, and book everything about it, go to rehearsal.pro/IAP right now, and you can learn all about the great new features in this newest version of Rehearsal. It's a groundbreaking, absolutely essential app that every actor should have in their toolkit. Check it out, rehearsal.pro/IAP.
Yo, 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 Trevinator. What's up, dog? Man, we have a lot to get to in this episode. I think there's one or two listener questions that we're actually going to skip because of all of the news and other things going on. So we have some membership, some highlights from the membership, right, to get to first?
Yeah, there's just a cool conversation happening in there. Brittany asks for advice on thrival jobs in there, which is a common actor obstacle. And there's some really good suggestions from both our very own Jen Levin and longtime awesome supporter listener Allie Everts. So check it out inside the membership. It's just about thrival jobs, and Brittany does a great job of sort of breaking down exactly what difficulties she's facing, and there's some really good solutions in there. And interestingly enough, you know, we've been talking about van life, like you and I have sort of been fantasizing about buying vans and just being complete like artistic digital nomads. There's a lot of YouTube videos out there that people have made from their vans as they're on the road, talking about, you know, the top 10 or 12 or sometimes even more ways that they make money on the road. And it seems like almost all of it would apply directly to someone who's, you know, also running a creative career in tandem with paying the bills. So there's some stuff to sort of like research outside of the membership, but also jump into the membership to get involved in that conversation. I just wanted to kind of highlight that. And just on this note as well, Jen also shared a really good blog post that she did for Ms. in the Biz a few years ago, and she links to that in the membership as well. It's a top 10 day jobs for actors post, and she does a really great job of summarizing how and why some of these jobs are ideal for actors. So check it out inside the membership.
Nice, man. I'm looking forward to checking that out. I'm just seeing this on the outline. I remember looking at Jen's blog post back then, but it's been a long time, so I'm excited to revisit all of this. That's awesome.
Yeah.
We also invite everyone to continue to use the hashtag Working Wednesday on Wednesdays, of course, on Twitter. That it's been growing, like it's sort of taking on a life of its own. It's really exciting to see, and it's a really cool way to bring together the community around acting and IAP and see what people are up to. I have found that the last several Wednesdays I've just been at my Thrival job. So now that we've been talking about Thrival jobs, it kind of gives me a good excuse to go, you know what? This is working. It's literally punching a clock. So maybe I'll start posting some photos from work.
Hey, yeah, a little iPhone X action, HomePod. You got a lot of products you guys are launching in the next few months.
Yeah, it's going to be a busy time for sure.
That's really exciting.
Yeah. And speaking of exciting, how's that for a segue?
Well job.
Yeah, well played. We have been, we probably should have been talking about this much further in advance. Obviously, the number of episodes is getting closer and creeping closer and closer and closer to a milestone episode. Episode 300 is shortly upon us. And as many longtime listeners know, we have held a little shindig or some kind of event for episodes 100 and 200. We're not actually going to be doing a live recording this time. Episodes 100 and 200 were around a live recording of something. They were actually both at the SAG-AFTRA, the SAG Foundation. And episode 100 was a panel of SAG-AFTRA employees, and episode 200 was a panel of most of the sort of higher up creators and the showrunner of TV's Defiance. Episode 300 we've been working on secretly, not so secretly. You guys don't necessarily know the content, but Jen and Trevor and myself have all been kind of teasing it out on social media, what we're going to be doing. So we're not going to have a live recording of the episode, but we are going to have a party. That's right. Come party with the IAP. It'll be somewhere in Los Angeles. Location is TBA. We're still working on figuring that out. But it will be sometime in December. Oh, we're also working out the date. Yeah, so we're looking at Monday, December 11th, but that is a tentative date. So just pencil entire month of December. Don't see your families for the holiday. You're going to a party that IAP is hosting for episode 300. But it's going to be exciting. We're hoping to have a lot of the guests from episode 300 show up, maybe some live Q&A action, and we're also hoping to do a screening that will sort of coordinate. I'm being very vague on purpose. That will sort of coordinate with the 300th episode content. So, yeah, if that wasn't confusing enough, I don't know what is. But, Trevor, do you have anything you'd like to add or save me from?
Just the big takeaway being that there is a big event we'd love to see you at coming up in LA at some point in the next 30 to 45 to possibly 60 days. We know it's the holidays, so things get kind of crazy. We're trying to get it sort of earlier rather than later to minimize conflicts that people might have. But yeah, just be listening, be tuned into our newsletter and our social media feeds. And of course, the episodes will be releasing more details about this as it comes up. But it's going to be a fun time. We're working on a lot of cool stuff to hopefully have as part of this. So yeah, episode 300 and the accompanying party coming up soonish.
Yes, thanks for adding in the ish.
Yeah.
So we've got a big sort of elephant in the room issue to tackle. And before we do, I just think we should probably do our sponsorship placement first, and then we'll take the rest of the first part of the bookends here to kind of go over this. So this episode, as many of our episodes, is of course brought to you in part by VO2GoGo.com, the award-winning voiceover training system and winner of Backstage's Reader's Choice Award for Best VO Training 4 years in a row. Visit VO2GoGo.com/start for a free Getting Started in VoiceOver online class that'll help you add voiceover to your acting portfolio. That's VO2GoGo.com/start. we have been remiss in terms of not talking about this issue, but I do have to say, not necessarily as an excuse, but it did sort of break wide open while I was still in Spain. And so we were kind of doing this like solo episode thing. And then the first episode back, I really did want to talk, I know this is selfish, and I will fully admit it, but I really did want to talk about the fact that, Jasmine and I got engaged. I was really excited about that, and I didn't necessarily want this to be sort of clouding that. So we got called out by some people on social media, rightly so, for not talking about the Harvey Weinstein issue and what's going on in the industry right now. And so I like I said, it's not really an excuse. I'm just kind of explaining sort of the chronology of what happened, and admitting to being, just kind of selfish. Like, I was really excited. It was a big event in my life, and I really wanted to talk about that, and didn't really want to talk about this fucking guy on top of it. So, please forgive us, but we've sort of dedicated the rest of this time before jumping into the interview to kind of address it and talk about it and explore it a bit. I'm wondering, Trevor, because you and I actually haven't had a chance to talk about this issue in any sort of in-depth way, just as like friends and colleagues and fellow artists in the industry, in Los Angeles, in the entertainment industry. I'm wondering, I don't even know what your thoughts around the whole thing have been since it sort of came to light.
Yeah, it's been I don't know, man. I'm a little bit all over the place with it, to be completely honest. It's something that everybody who is at all in any way sort of taking part in Western mainstream culture, it's something that they just sort of know, that they understand, that happens. The casting couch has been a sort of, running joke, just the idea of what it is and what it stands for and what happens. Everybody sort of acknowledged it in a joking way as long as I've been in the industry, as long as I've even been thinking about being in the industry since I was a kid. There were sort of jokes and, story, like people would poke fun at me and say, oh, don't end up in porn. You're going to end up in porn. You're going to end up on someone's casting couch. And it was always sort of funny, but I never thought about it beyond that, really, until all these people started coming forward and I realized how pervasive it is. And I've been really sitting with it because I'm being very careful about how much to say here. Cause I don't know if you know this, AJ, I think I've hinted at it, but I actually have also been a victim of this. And, there's been a lot of focus around men taking advantage of women. And that I think is probably what happens more often than not. But there's been some talk about men being taken advantage of, either by women or by other men, and manipulated and coerced. And it's very difficult for men to talk about. It's very sort of emasculating. And more and more men are coming forward and saying, hey, this has happened to me. And when I first moved out here years and years and years ago, and I had no idea what I was doing, I fell into that trap as well. And I didn't have the maturity or the courage to understand what was happening until it had gotten to a very advanced place. And I also didn't understand how to get myself out of it. And it's something that's been very potent for me, this whole thing. And I've been sort of back and forth about jumping on the Me Too bandwagon. I don't think I'm ready yet, but yeah, man, it's a very real, close to home thing, and I'm very activated by it, I guess you could say.
Yeah, it's triggering.
Yeah.
Well, wow. Well, thank you for your vulnerability. Yeah, I never thought about the fact that there's these jokes that people make about it, like it's laughable. Like don't be suckered into the sort of casting couch thing. And I didn't realize that this being a trigger for you was also, potentially contributing to our sort of, skirting around the issue. And of course you are in control of your own story. So you can share or not as much as, you want to. I think that there is in some ways some sort of, I don't know if hope is the right word, but some sort of hope. The fact that so much of it is coming to light and so much of it is being put out there in such a public way, because one of the best articles that I read about the whole issue, and I wish I knew who wrote it. I can't remember his name. He's a very well-known and well-respected writer in the industry, someone who worked with Harvey Weinstein in the early days of his production company, and Harvey sort of put him on the map. I feel just awful forgetting his name, but he wrote this fantastic article, and the whole theme of the article was everybody knew.
Yeah.
Like everybody knew everyone, men, women, talented, untalented, working, not working, winning awards, not winning awards, there in the room, not in the room, by his side, not by his side. Everybody knew. And the sort of, he was calling people out for the mock outrage that it happened. And he was like, you were there. You were in the same rooms that I was in with him. You were at the same parties as me. I know you were there. You can't pretend to be outraged. And then he had this remorse for having, felt like he turned away or turned a blind eye or in some other way perpetuated the issue. And I think if more people could take that stance of admitting, yeah, I may not have been a perpetrator myself, but I kind of stood by and watched it happen, then we could make even more progress even faster on this issue. I don't know that I've ever been in a position of power enough to sort of take advantage of that position of power to like coerce someone into doing something for me. But I'm a guy. I'm a large guy. I'm over 6 feet. I have an athletic build. I'm a big person, and from like college age until probably 4 or 5 years ago, I thought I was like the most charming, person on the planet. So I think in that combination, I can almost guarantee, without being able to point to like a specific instance, I can almost guarantee that I have done something that has made some female or potentially even male, I don't know, uncomfortable. I feel quite remorseful about that, especially not being able to name it. And I think that what's most important, as we've talked about many, many times on the podcast, is just about awareness. We get to be aware of that this is happening and do whatever we can, whatever our part is in it, to make a change here. And I don't know what that looks like. I don't know if you've had any thoughts on that too, like what could possibly be, the difference moving forward.
That's a great question. It's interesting because part of what's happening right now reminds me in this detached way. Please don't hate me for making this comparison, but this is sort of kind of what comes up, because sometimes I wonder if someone really disliked someone else in the industry and there was no truth to these claims. It almost feels like a witch hunt sometimes. I mean, again, I have, experienced my share of being on the sort of receiving end of this, the sort of victim side of things. So I'm not belittling anybody's experience whatsoever, but I'm just really glad we're talking about it. I'm just really glad that the conversation is happening and that more and more people are feeling empowered and safe coming forward with these stories, because it's not okay. It's a story that's as old as humankind, unfortunately. This is just kind of what happens with people. There's good and evil in the world. It doesn't mean it needs to be that way going forward. So I'm really happy to hear more and more people sharing these stories. I'm reminded of something that my professor and advisor in college said to me before we graduated. And I think I've shared this on the show before, but he gave us a little list of 5 or 10 things to take forward into our careers, wherever we end up. And they're just like little maxims or little mantras or sort of tips on how to sort of navigate the industry. And one of them said, you can forgive, but you never have to forget. And I think that it's important to keep that in mind when it comes to something like this. Having experienced something, in this realm, I understand the importance of forgiveness. There's a saying somewhere in the, ancient Zen saying or something that they say that, holding a grudge or something like that is kind of like drinking poison and hoping the other person will die. And I've experienced that for many years. And it wasn't until a few years ago, actually, in the emotional intelligence training, that I was able to really come to terms with what it was. And I learned to practice, because it's a moment-to-moment thing, learn to practice forgiving this person. So, it's a complex, layered issue. It's very individual, very unique, very emotional, obviously. I'm just really glad we're talking about it.
I want to say one thing about what you said earlier about the witch hunt, because it would be very easy. Jasmine and I had a very similar conversation when we were in Spain, and it all started coming to pass. It was sort of triggering for me, because at first it sounded like she was saying we need to forgive immediately, kind of what you were just saying, Trevor, like we need to forgive so that we can kind of move forward. And I was like, wait a second, like, don't we need to hold these people accountable? But once we finally got onto the same page, I just want to see if this is kind of what you were talking about, Trevor, when you were having a hard time articulating exactly what it was. But it's important that when people come forward, men, women, especially women, that they are believed, right? That's a really important aspect to this. And another important aspect, and I think this would summarize Jasmine's point, although I would love to ask her, is the problem. What do we learned this in those exact emotional intelligence trainings? The problem cannot be solved at the level at which it was created, right? So her point was constantly focusing on the shaming of the people who are the perpetrators puts the focus and the energy in the wrong place. Like, we're not raising the consciousness, we're not progressing, we're not moving forward, we're not doing whatever it takes to make a change, to take that next step. Does that kind of hit home with what you were just saying?
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. It reminds me of another saying. I'm just full of sayings. These little nuggets of wisdom have come to me throughout my life, and I just hang on to them and keep them in a little sort of mind purse, and then I just pull them out constantly throughout the day. But it was the Millionaire Mind Intensive with D. Harv Eker, and he said, where attention goes, energy flows, and results show. So basically, that which you focus on expands. So that law is completely unbiased. It has no preference. Like, no matter where you put your energy is where you're going to see an expansion of results of some kind. And it's really easy for humans to, cast judgment and shame people and burn the witch and all those things. It's really easy. That's sort of, it's almost like, I'm not saying that people shouldn't be brought to justice, but I am saying that it's the lazy person's way out to end there. I think we need to go one step further and imagine, like you were asking earlier, to imagine what an alternative reality could look like, where this doesn't even exist. It's not even a blip on anyone's radar, because this new thing exists. And so where attention goes, energy flows, and results show. And I think that's I think that is absolutely huge. You can't forgive somebody and move on and create something new without having some sort of seed of a hint of a whiff of what that new thing could be. It's important, I think, for us to put a little energy towards creating something new rather than, dissing and hating and judging the system and the people that have exploited it.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Trev. And, and I like that you said that it doesn't necessarily take the place of justice or holding people accountable. It's just, what's next? You keep saying, I'm glad we're talking about it. And the thing is, like, it's an ongoing conversation. It is very layered, as you mentioned. And I think we could talk about it for a long time, and we could unpack different aspects of it. And I want to make sure that we are sort of lending our energy and our time to the more positive aspects, as opposed to the, maintaining the system that perpetuates it. So, I would like to, at this point, sort of reach out to our listeners, especially our female listeners, and especially any listener, male or female, who or otherwise, who has been, victimized by this, or has, some thoughts on, what did we miss today? What else would you like to hear talked about on the podcast? And I also want to use this as an opportunity to tease the fact that I didn't want to tease this until later, but this seems like a perfect opportunity. We are currently putting together an all-female takeover of the podcast, and of course that was brought to us by some of the females involved with the podcast, specifically Jasmine. She is sort of her brainchild. So, it's something that we want to be conscious of. And, in the past, there was a time where, just because of scheduling, we had several, white male guests just lined up, one right after the other. And some of our female listeners were like, hey, what about the ladies? So, it's something that's important to us. And if you ever see or hear us sort of straying from a mission of inclusion and diversity and addressing these issues head on, like, call us out. Like I said, we got called out a little bit on social media, and we welcome that. We're not gonna pretend like we didn't hear you, or try to avoid an issue because it's too difficult or something, Well, I feel like if Michael's listening to this, he's gonna be like, thanks for setting me up with a hilarious conversation, guys, because I did get a chance to listen to part one of this interview, and a lot of it is, he not only does he have some great things to say, he has a lot of, his sense of humor is just fantastic around it all. I do want to mention, we have turned away a lot of people who are selling a class or a product or a book or whatever. And I just want to say, like, one of the reasons that we love Michael and talk about him a lot and we're willing to bring him back on the show is because in the interview itself, he's giving everything away for free. Like everything he is saying in these interviews is in some part of the workshops and the books that he works on. So, I think that's the distinction between Michael and someone else who might be trying to pitch themselves to the podcast so that they can come on and sell something. Not only is he giving a lot of stuff away for free here on the show, but he is also not charging a lot of money for his workshops because he gets it. He's not doing it for the money. He's doing it because he loves it, and he knows that a lot of actors who are working on getting better in the audition room probably aren't rolling in it.
And he actively works with actors who may have trouble paying the full price for the workshop. So he's very open to finding a way to get you to the workshop.
Yeah, so enjoy this part one of the updated interview with Michael Kostroff, and we'll catch you on the other side.
everybody, this is Trev, and I'm really excited to be sitting back down again with the one and only Michael Kostroff. Now, savvier listeners may remember Michael's name from episodes 225 and 226, which was like maybe a year or two ago now. At this point, but we talked about his career, going from a sort of, how did you describe it, Michael? You described it as being like a painfully shy or horrifically bad auditioner, and
sounds right.
Yeah, it was really cool to hear about this journey from somebody who was self-described introverted, that it was almost like damaging, to someone who's had such a prolific career and now even teaches one of the best and most powerful workshops I've ever attended on how to reframe your relationship to auditions so that you love that process and you go in there and you just crush it every time, feeling like you're doing your best work. It's a real gift what you do for the industry, both by example and by teaching. So really excited to have you.
Thank you. You make me sound like the Dalai Lama, but I'll take it. No, I think it's the reason that I'm able to teach the workshop that I teach and the way that I teach it is because I took the full journey from being the crappiest auditioner ever to kind of being okay at it now. So
yeah, and that's so true too. I find that those people are almost always the best sort of mentors and guides. The people that have like been through the crap and they just like, look, I know how bad it can possibly be. Here's what I learned. So if you guys want to connect with that aspect of the story, Michael's journey, and some of the things we talked about before, be sure to check out episodes 225 and 226. We'll link to those in the show notes for this episode on the podcast website. But a lot has happened since we last chatted. You were in Wizard of Lies, which we alluded to back in the previous episodes, but you played Robert De Niro's brother, which had to have been super cool.
Yeah.
and then of course, you've also got a new workshop that you're doing called Comedy for the Unfunny. Is that right?
Yes. I like the name of it. Yeah. I do a lot of audition coaching. I love it. It's just something that I really enjoy, working with actors, and having them come in and be freaking out about an audition and then leave going, I can't wait to do this. That's my favorite thing. And in that work, I've worked with a lot of actors who say, look, I'm just not funny. I just don't do comedy. And that's their take on it. They have it in their mind that it's a certain bag of tricks or there's certain things that you just have to know how to do. And I've given a lot of thought to that because I do think that some people are naturally funny and you can't teach that. I'm one of those people who's very instinctive about comedy. People come to me for advice on it. Sometimes I just go, well, if I move the coffee cup on that line, it's going to be funny. And I don't know why, it just is. You can't teach that. But what I've been doing with my strictly drama folks is teaching them about comedy through the tools that they know, which is, stakes and all the basics, the acting basics of stakes and objectives and obstacles. These things are present in comedy, and people are surprised by that. They're like, I thought you just had to be very fake. And I'm like, no, you have to be very, very real. That one of the discoveries that I've made through this is that the situation is rarely funny to the character. Usually it's deadly serious. I was one of the understudies for Max Bialystock on the first tour of the producers, and somebody said, "I like what you're doing. What are you doing?" And I said, "I am doing Greek tragedy. That is absolutely not a joke. I am playing the highest possible stakes. There is no other outcome but one. This character has got to get recognition on Broadway again, and he'll bite through a steel wall if that's what it takes." It's just stakes, like the highest stakes, and kind of accepting those stakes in a ridiculous situation. Sorry, I revved up on this subject, so I feel like I've now taken over the conversation.
No, it's great because the one way you put it in the email to me was you said that you've had some discoveries around playing comedy. I saw economy when I looked at that word for some reason. I guess that's sort of another story.
Please keep it. Don't cut it.
Yeah, playing comedy when you're not instinctively funny, and what you just described is so great in theory, but I almost I'm trying to think about. I'm projecting ahead in the future in my head, and I'm thinking like, okay, so next time you have this funny scene, just ramp up the stakes. But how do you do that in practice? How do you coach actors to do that in tangible advice form?
Great question, because of course it's not just as simple as that. In my workshop, I talk about some recurring comedic elements that people can look for. Like, for example, disproportionate reactions. somebody who has a very mild reaction to a very dire circumstance or an overreaction to a very minor circumstance. They're weeping on the floor because they burnt the toast, or they're about a war. So that's just an example of something you see a lot in comedy, and things like people in the wrong job, or a warped self-perception, mismatched cultures and energies. And it sounds very dry and technical, but what we do is we build sort of a toolkit. So when people crack open a scene, they're like, oh, I see where the joke is. And now that I see where the joke is, I've got to get on that bus and drive that to the nth degree.
Interesting. Yeah. There's mechanical things you can identify in the script. It's like, oh, here's that trope or that trick. And I can just identify that. And then I have a toolbox to unpack it with. It's
obviously it's not scientific, but for example, we were watching a scene from the Pink Panther. And I'm like, okay, so what from our list is going on? Well, he's a guy in the wrong job. He thinks he's fooling people and he's not. So he has a warped self-perception, right? There are two people with different ideas of the story in the same scene. It's like all these things that we can go, okay, well, now I understand what they're doing that gets us to the funny. I feel like when I describe it, it sounds very dry, but we have so many laughs kind of uncovering these things. Like I said, I've always been very instinctive about comedy. I haven't necessarily been this analytical before. One of the things that I've really learned through teaching this is that the extent to which we have to make a case for our own character and not be judgmental, not say, well, she's overreacting. It's just like playing a villain. You can't go, well, I'm evil, I'm bad. The character's driven by something, like they want love, or they want recognition, or life hasn't lived up to their expectations. And if you will just not judge the ridiculousness of the situation and commit to that and make it real for that character, it's so damn funny. One of the scenes I always use is The Odd Couple. And I say to the guys, forget funny. Forget being funny. There's nothing funny in this scene. If you're Felix, you have a worldview. There are certain things you do and don't do, and anything else is barbaric. You don't put your feet up on the table where you eat food. It's barbaric. And when somebody does that, it's mind-boggling. Now, what we have to do is drive that bus to the very end of that path and go, it's insane. It's impossible. It's crass, right? And if you're Oscar, the whole reason that I'm not living with a woman is so I don't have to get nagged. And like, what's the point of being a man if I can't put my fucking feet up on the table? So it's these very strong worldviews that don't go well together. Anyway, it's really been a blast because, as you know, I kind of love empowering people who think they're not empowered.
I want to comment about that because you said earlier that you said you encounter a lot of actors who don't see themselves as comedic actors. They see themselves as like, I am a dramatic actor and that's just how I'm built and that's just my burden to bear. But I've never seen myself like that. I've always seen comedy as a skill set or drama as a skill set. But do you run into a lot of actors who just feel like they're just stuck in this one mode of expression?
I'll put it this way. The workshop is called Comedy for the Unfunny, and people sign up. So,
okay, obviously, yeah.
No, it's not limited to people who are not funny. I mean, it's sort of a facetious name. I have people who come who are quite good at comedy who just want sort of a new take on it and new tools and to increase it. And it's funny. I laugh because I'm best known for all these dramatic roles, which is so not my thing. Comedy is so my world. That's what I dig doing. But I think people mostly know me from The Wire and The Deuce and all these serious shows. But what I think is great is that I'm giving these actors this experience where they're making people laugh in class by being really truthful in their work and really building the stakes and building the case for the character and telling the truth and being honest in their work. And I think a lot of dramatic actors, they just don't want to feel like they're being phony. It's funny. I do some very broad comedy, but I don't like lying. It has to be that important and that real for the character.
Now, is it a one night thing like Audition Psych is, or is it multiple?
I've done it as a 1 day intensive. I find it's better as a 2 day intensive, which is how I'm doing it these days. I've done it here in New York. I've done it in Atlanta. I did it in Vancouver, which was a lot of fun. The 2 day format it gives people a chance to kind of marinate overnight. And we get to do more scenes and talk about more stuff. And sometimes there are a couple of little tricks of the trade that I throw in, some little trickier techniques, but I think the main thing is to find their way into the funny, and it's great to see that happen.
I really appreciate the holistic approach that you take to auditioning, at least in audition psych that I've been to, that you described, and I can't imagine that a lot of that doesn't bleed over into the comedy workshop as well. That it's just a very much like you another thing you outlined in the email to me was you said, you're learning more and more just to teach clients and students and actors that it's just about asking the question to the suspect or getting the committee to listen to reason or just convince. Like, it's so simple when you pare it down like that and you just get rid of all like not that these things aren't important, but like backstory and character motivation and all these different, methodologies and techniques. It's like when it comes down to it, you're just doing this one thing as a human being right then. It's
true. I think to me, the stuff that I really try to eliminate is the trying. Like the trying to be funny, the trying to act well, the trying to impress a casting director. Trying is death. It's terrible. I mean, and what you talked about is it's sort of a quiet little breakthrough I had in my work and in my coaching, because it sounds so obvious, but so often we're going to an audition to try to do well as an actor or make an impression or do it right or do it in the way that they want. When if you really focus on, I'm going to figure out if this suspect is guilty, I'm telling you, it is such a little key to happier and more fulfilling auditions. You're just doing the character's job. That character doesn't give a shit if you're a good actor or not. That character doesn't care if you get cast or if the casting director likes you. That character needs to find out if the suspect is guilty, or needs to make sure that her husband knows how much she loves him. And that, when you really embrace the character's mission, what the character needs to do, you kind of sail over all these kind of potholes in the road. It's so simple though, right? It is. And
I'm actually getting goosebumps as you're talking, because I'm thinking back to all the auditions that I thought I nailed. I prepped for, and I hired coaches, and I choreographed every emotional beat, every hand gesture. And I went in there and I was like flying high, and I didn't get the part. And then almost everything that I have booked was when I was like, I think I'm going to quit acting today. Like literally, I was like, as soon as I'm done with this stupid audition, I'm going to call my agent and tell him it's done, it's over, I'm moving to Denver or wherever. And then I book every single time. And it's because something about that not trying comes through.
I think when you're in that state, you're just going to enjoy acting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, the mantra that I teach in my audition psych class is you're not getting the fucking job.
Yeah.
We can curse on this show, right? Because I've done it like all 5 times.
Yeah, let it fly. Absolutely.
But I live by you're not getting the fucking job, because almost every time you're not getting the fucking job, and trying to get the job is so not conducive to getting the job. We put ourselves in this terrible straitjacket as actors, and it's just not conducive. It doesn't work like that. All those stories are true when people are like, well, I don't care about it, and then I get it, or I was quitting and I get it. But you can't make yourself want to quit the business or not care about a part. But what you can do is go, that's not what I'm doing today. I'm not trying to get a part because I'm not going to get it. I'm going to go play this part. I'm going to tell the patient and make sure that they know what's in their chart today, or I'm going to, find out how the customer wants his haircut. That's what I'm doing today. That's who I am.
Yeah, I had a mini breakthrough actually in a scene I was doing in the play once. It's just a tough play to do, and I remember just not wanting to go on stage because I was just so emotionally like out of touch with everything. I was like, I don't want to do this. And so I was like, what if the character felt that way? And then I did that, and I had this huge breakthrough. So I went out there, and my character all of a sudden just was like, bleh. And it just felt so effortless. And I started bringing that into my auditions as well. And I was like, I don't need to go in here and act and put on some emotion 99% of the time. I can just be, and you teach this in audition psych, you can just go in with the energy you have and just be.
Yeah, it's a little tricky because I don't ever mean to suggest that people shouldn't do their acting work and create the state of mind that they want their character to be in. But there are days when you can't do that.
Yeah, like you said, like there are days where if that doesn't work, here's the alternative approach. I remember you.
Again, I'm going to repeat myself. You can always cut it out. But to me, the thing that never works is auditioning with the effort to try to impress a casting director or get a job. None of us knows how to do that. well, there was a girl in one of my workshops, and she started laughing when I was talking about this. And I said, "What's so funny?" She goes, "It's just so freeing." She said, "What's funny is I had an audition yesterday where my character was begging for her life, and I can do that. I just can't get a job." I was like, yeah, that's right. That's right. We know how to do that. You know?
Yeah. Now, one thing you also mentioned was that you said, when you're working with actors and clients and students, and you're saying like, it's not about acting well, like stop trying to do that. Again, just question the suspect, tell the patient, what the situation is. You say it's especially difficult to do this with the smaller on-screen parts, and that those parts are sometimes the hardest. So why is that, do you find?
Oh God, I'm so glad you asked me about that. The 1 and 2 liners are really, really hard for a number of reasons. Typically, it's less experienced actors who are going in for them, and it feels like you're shot out of a cannon. You've got one shot to dazzle them, and you're done. And the pressure on that moment to try to do it in some fascinating way that's different and all these things is it can really screw you up. And you're so self-conscious, and your face looks twitchy because you're watching yourself. And the thing that's hard for actors, and this is just those parts I'm particularly talking about on TV and film, very often they don't need anything from that character other than find out if the customer wants more coffee, and it's hard for us to do just that and not put some spin on it or try to stand out. But they really, when you watch the movie or the TV show, think about what you want in that role. Nothing. Nothing. Not some big emotional arc. I mean, and I think people do that to try to stand out, but it's not what that job requires. I was coaching somebody the other day for a reporter. Reporters are very hard to play because they don't have an emotional attachment. That's their job, is not to, and to just try to get the governor to answer a question. That's it. That's your whole job that day. And again, I'm speaking from experience. This is how I built my resume, was on those little things. I approached them, again, trying to do some magical thing that's going to make somebody hire them, and there is no there. To just dare to go in and say, "Buddy, you have to move your car. You can't park there," and just do that. Just let them know. That's the whole day. Yeah. That's it.
Actors in LA are very familiar with that scenario.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and one thing that's coming to mind as you're talking about this is everything around that delivery of the audition process. So going in and communicating, whether with words or just body language or voice tone, like you said in the last time we talked, you talked about how like when you go in, you are the professional. Like you are the surgeon giving surgery to the patient. That's the level of professionalism to client that you're bringing to this. And so when you go in and you're just like, okay, you got to move your car. Can you talk a little bit more about all the other pieces of the puzzle? Like when it comes to just walking, like how do you do it when you walk into a room and you're like, okay, I'm an actor. This is what I do. Like you said in the last interview, and I go around to place. I sell my wares. Is there anything specifically that you found through trial and error is like, okay, this doesn't work when I try to do such and such, but it always works when I do this? And this is above and beyond the acting part.
Yes. I'm going to answer your question in a tricky way. What I have found doesn't work is trying to find something that works every time. Because
I like that.
every casting director is different. Everybody, we talk about them as if they're this big they. What do they want? So, there are actors going, well, do you shake their hand? Do you smile? Do you have a catchphrase? And I'm like, no, I just come in to do my work. And because I've gotten myself so much calmer about the process, I'm open to the impulses. If they want to chat, we chat. And this is going to sound braggy. I like that I've gotten to the point where we might talk about a movie we saw or a TV show we watched or nothing, if we feel like it or if we know each other. But most of the time, just come do the damn work. Get the guy to move his car. That's it. But I think a lot of people are going, well, what does Michael do in that room? And there isn't any special thing that I do. And I should add, I like being candid about these things because I think it helps listeners. I've just come off a really long non-booking period. You know, people think of me as this guy who works constantly, and it's really especially weird right now because I'm on TV on several channels at once. I did that work last year, you know, so it's not like I book everything. You know, I mostly don't, just like everybody else. I probably have more auditions, but I mostly don't book, you know. So it isn't like, what is this magical man doing in these rooms? I'm mostly getting rejected. That's what I'm doing, you know.
Right. What would you say? Could you put your booking ratio into numbers between how much you book versus how much you just audition?
I don't know. It's a very tricky. What do you call it? Algorithm? What's it called? I don't know what the thing is.
I asked, you know, David H. Lawrence, who's a mutual friend of ours and who's so great. He's got that percentage point down to like the second or third decimal place. Like well, he knows exactly how much he books.
I was actually talking to him the other day. He's so much more organized and brainy than I am. I'm a little bit slow, throw the spaghetti up against the wall. But you know, one of the reasons it's harder to answer is I sort of go on more auditions, but I sort of go on fewer because my agents don't want me to do certain things. So it's, you know, it's a little bit more selective. So I couldn't even guess. I couldn't guess. I'm just, you know, I just broke a 6-month dry spell, so I'm grateful for that.
Wow.
That's all I know.
You hadn't booked or shot anything in 6 months?
I haven't had a TV, an on-camera job in 6 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, within that time, I directed a play, you know. I've done a reading or two, you know. I had this weird job that dropped out of the sky that involved me singing at Carnegie Hall. Long story. So,
whoa.
Yeah, but mostly I've been working on 2 books that I'm writing, and I've been coaching, and yeah. So it's not like I don't want anybody to look at me and think, yeah, he's got it all wrapped up, because I don't. But I think what I've done is sort of take some of the agony out of the process, which is much more important to me, is to enjoy the auditions. You know, I keep referencing it. 6 or 8 months ago, I auditioned for a production of All My Sons. You know, it's Arthur Miller. It's this great writing.
Yeah.
And I don't get to audition a lot for Arthur Miller plays. Now, I didn't get cast in it, but I wouldn't have missed for the world the chance to do Arthur Miller, to do all the detective work, to do the characterization, and have somebody stop their day to watch me do that. Man, that's it. That's the high, you know. If you could learn to relish those couple of moments in the room and not try to affect an outcome, God, you just win. You win,
yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And it was fun. Like, I would go back and do it again, even knowing that I wasn't going to get the part. Because it's Arthur Miller, you know? And I think we forget that we love this stuff, you know?
Yeah. I remember my agent telling me something that changed my whole relationship to all this. He said, you know, when you audition, like when you go in the room, that's your first day of work. Like, you should be as prepared as if they were, you know, you were in wardrobe, makeup, and all that, and you were filming. That's your first day of work. And if you don't get called back, then that was your last day of work as well, and that's fine. But that's the level of commitment that you should have.
Well, and again, the reason I approach the auditions with the dedication I do is because I'm not getting the fucking job. I'm giving one performance in this Arthur Miller play. I'm gonna enjoy the hell out of it.
Hey folks, welcome back to the Bookends. I hope you enjoyed part 1 of this interview as much as I did. I got a chance to listen to it right before we started recording, Trev. Great job. Love this man. Love his mindset. Love his sense of humor. And as we just mentioned before the interview started, love his generosity, his willingness to sort of give it away. All right. What is your pick of the week, brother?
I'm a big fan of Rich Roll. I'm sure there's a lot of listeners listening right now who know who that is. For those of you who don't, Rich Roll is an ultra endurance athlete. He does like those Ultraman marathon things. But anyway, I've been following Rich Roll. Rich Roll's got a great podcast, and one of his guests, his recurring guest, is this guy named John Joseph. And John Joseph is like your quintessential New Yorker. He's got a really interesting story. He's in like a punk band, and he was in jail for a while because of dealing drugs, but now he's in his 50s, and he's also like a crazy triathlete. And he's a very outspoken vegan, and he's about as New York as you get, from the way he talks to how he dresses, and he's just a really entertaining guy. He's got a new web series, and it's called The Hard Truth, and it's essentially him just sort of going about his day, but also, you know, cooking these really great looking vegan meals in the kitchen. And he talks about his past and some of the stranger, you know, quote unquote stranger sort of habits he's adopted over the years. His web series, awesome. It's called The Hard Truth. His name is John Joseph. There's a link to it on our website. Check it out. The episodes are maybe 10, 12 minutes. You can also listen to his interviews on the Rich Roll podcast. He's been on there 2 or 3 times, and he's just a fascinating guy. And yeah, if you're looking for a few entertaining minutes on YouTube, check out John Joseph's The Hard Truth web series. There's also, I should just add this real quickly, there's also a great 20-minute, I think it's a Vice documentary, or maybe it's one of those, some sort of mini web documentary about him that's also really cool. I'll find a link for that and put it on the website as well.
Wow. Well, so when we were traveling, I knew I wanted to do some reading, and I have been putting off. I haven't seen, well, I can't say this anymore, but at the time I had never seen a single episode of Game of Thrones. And at this point I've only seen the trailer. And I did that or not the trailer, the pilot. I did that on purpose because I really, really wanted to read the books before I watched the show. And of course it's like one of those things where, you know, now years have gone by and I haven't picked them up, but I picked up, we actually, Jasmine and I found all the first 5 books in a complete sort of series that was on sale, super steep discount on Kindle one time. And so I got all 5 books in one sort of compilation for I don't remember what it was, $20 or something like that. So can't beat the price. And I just picked it up, when we left, literally when we were at LAX before we left to Spain, and got through half the book by the time we got home. And those are big books, very thick and kind of dense, especially when it comes to the genealogy stuff, trying to keep track of the families in the series. And I loved it. So even if you've seen the show, I would encourage you to go back and read the books, because I was I can't remember, a quarter of the way, a third of the way through the book before the end of the pilot episode event happened. So I know they're leaving out tons and tons and tons of stuff out of the TV show, as they always do when some book gets converted into a TV show or a film. But they're really good. He's a good writer, and it's really interesting, and it's very Tolkien-esque, obviously. But I can't recommend. I'm having a blast. It's really fun read. So that's my pick. I know it's dated, and a lot of people are probably waiting for the next episode of the TV show to come out. But if you've never picked up the books, I would encourage you to do so. So Game of Thrones, that's my pick of the week.
Awesome. We do have a listener pick of the week we want to quickly give a shout out to. This comes to us from JD. JD wrote in quite a while ago with a book that's called The Mind-Body Prescription by a guy named Dr. John E. Sarno. I believe that this doctor actually recently passed away, which I'm bummed to hear. But the way JD describes it, I immediately went out and ordered the book, and it just got delivered a week or 2 ago. So I'm excited to read it. But JD says this book helped alleviate back pain and muscle spasms and paralysis and panic attacks, all these things that JD never had to deal with before. Long story short, JD says I went to the doctors, I got x-rays done, I went through physical therapy, nothing was helping. A friend recommended this book, and this book talks about how certain personality types, for example, perfectionists or goodists, deal with a lot of repressed emotions that the brain gets scared of, and whenever it panics, it then diverts attention by hurting you. For instance, your back, your neck, your hip, pain and injuries manifesting differently in different people. JD says, I'm still going through the treatment process, but I can actually work out and dance again without fear of another episode of spasms or panic attacks. And with our profession where we deal with intense emotions, I think this may be valuable. I second that. I can't wait to dig into this book, and this is not the first time I've heard this book spoken of very highly.
This sounds fascinating, man, and what a great pick for JD to make the connection with this book and artists in general, but actors and specifically. That's great. Thank you for that, JD. So that's John Joseph's The Hard Truth web series from Trev there. Game of Thrones, the book, now in paper form or digital form. Man, you can't even make that joke anymore. And The Mind-Body Prescription by Dr. John E. Sarno via JD out in New York. Thank you for that. Anything else, or shall we roll on out of here, Brock?
I think we can get out of here. The only thing I wanted to mention is that make sure you check out auditionpsych101.com for an up-to-date list of when and where you can attend one of Michael Kostroff's workshops. Be sure to check that out. You can get on his mailing list, which is just something that every actor should be on. And I hope you guys get to experience some of his work and meet him in person, because he's, like I said, he's a stellar human being. Good person to know. So that does it for episode 296, which was produced and co-hosted by me, Trevor Algatt, and AJ Meyer, of course. Team IAP also includes Jen Levin, Gadala Gubrek, Deborah Smith, and Grace Gordon.
Visit us online on the interwebs at insideacting.net to sign up for our weekly email dispatch and listen to all of our episodes. That's insideacting.net. You can also find us on social media and wherever you get your podcasts. If you got a minute, you can hop on over to iTunes, leave us a review, especially the ones of the 5-star variety. Those really help us out a lot. If you don't want to leave a 5-star, write us, call us, let us know why. We still have a voicemail, for crying out loud, that is like the set of an old Western with like a tumbleweed going across. It's 1, 2, and 3, 2 actors. 213-222-8677. Still have that memorized, man. That's crazy.
Still got it. That's
still
impressive.
got it. Still up there somewhere.
Big thanks to our sponsors, Rehearsal Pro and VO to Go-Go, and a big thanks to you guys listening. This is your podcast as much as anybody else's, so be sure to let us know what you like, what you don't like, and what you want to see more of. You can also visit our website to get links to everything that we are doing and talking about in this and every episode. And if you'd like, and you really want to see the show continue, a great way to do it is to show your support financially by chipping in to help us out with production costs, traveling costs, all that fun stuff. You can do that online at insideacting.net. Yeah, you'll see it there. That's where you can go to learn all about the show and support us.
And that's it for episode 296 of Inside Acting. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week. And in the meantime, rise above.